All
Got
right.
it.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Horse Wisdom Virtual Book Club. I'm Kim Hallen. I'm your host. And today we're going to be talking about lesson 4 in Horse Wisdom, Life Lessons for Humanity, which is trust yourself first. So I've got 3 wonderful women with me here right now, and a 4th one who's probably going to be joining shortly. And I'm going to just have them each introduce themselves and say where they're logging in from for those who might be watching the recording back, so you'll know who we've got. So I'm going to start right below me on the screen. So this is full disclosure. This is my lovely aunt, Kathy. If you'll introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Aunt Kathy. I'm logging in from Toronto. Obviously, I had difficulty logging in. I didn't know I needed an ID number. But talk about trusting yourself. I just kept punching buttons, and it finally got me in, and I never used any numbers. I guess they thought I was determined to get into this meeting.
Love
But
it.
I'm glad I could join tonight. I often have responsibilities for grandchildren that I never always know ahead of time. So I missed a lot of the book clubs. So I was glad I could join tonight. They're both in a camp tonight. So that's it was my time to join. So thank you.
You get a little free time. It's wonderful to see you. I'm so glad you could be here tonight.
Yeah.
All right, Anna.
I am Anna Fox, and I am logging in from sort of north central Virginia near Warrenton. And I am thrilled to be here. I love these discussions. So.
You've been here. I think you've been to the most of them so far, maybe.
Really? I did miss the last one because that's when we were in Tennessee, but I watched it and it was fun.
Yeah. Kate was brave to do that one by herself. I loved it.
Yeah, she was.
All right, Mary.
I'm Mary Siggers. I am from Hartsville, South Carolina, the home of the sweat bombs. Oh my God. I have missed, I think, all of these book club meetings, and I'm so sorry, but it's so good to be here tonight. I've been a Kim follower, yay person since the beginning, so I am excited to be here.
Yeah, Mary and I go way back. In fact, Mary is the person I bought my very first horse, Lilith, from. She's in the book too. So Mary and I go way back. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so good to see you.
Thanks.
All right. So trust yourself first. It's so interesting that maybe it's just what's on our mind when we have something comes into our awareness, and knowing that this chapter was what we're going to be talking about this month. The last 2 weeks, at least 3 of the sessions that I've done here with folks on the farm, this issue of trusting yourself, and we call it the spidey sense, right? Listening to, if you're a Spider-Man fan, that's that's what that's from, having spidey sense. But it's listening to your gut, kind of that inner truth that's inside you. And this is something that, for whatever reason, lots of reasons, we can talk about that tonight, is something that's very hard for a lot of humans. Animals are really good at it, right? They don't really have too much trouble trusting themselves. It's challenging for us sometimes when they trust themselves more than they trust us. We have sometimes a hard time accepting that. We probably also have a hard time accepting it when other people trust themselves more than they trust us. So that's an interesting thing we can talk about too. But I guess I'll just start like we often have with either just this little introduction, or if you remember, it may have been a while since you read the lesson, but if there's something particular that struck you about it, something that's interesting about feedback I've gotten, that's probably the one chapter that I've had some, especially horse people, being a little bit confused about, because in horse training, we have this thing where we like to try to figure out how to make our idea become the animal's idea, or make the animal think that our idea is their idea. So that's the way you approach things in training. And so me working with Rayleigh in that way that day, where I wasn't trying to train him to get on the trailer, and I was really trying to give him a choice. I wanted it to be his choice, not my manipulating him into the choice. And so some feedback about that being like, well, isn't that contradictory? You didn't want to force the horse, but yet you forced the horse, right? Wouldn't it have been better to work on training him, in that moment, or taking the time it takes to come back and do that? So it's just two different things, right? There's two different goals of how I was wanting to relate with him, and there's no right or wrong, right? It's just would it, you know, is it better to manipulate someone into believing your idea is their idea in order to get it done, or is it okay to say, you trusting yourself, I'm trusting myself in this situation? You know, something has to happen, or yeah, one of us almost, it's not really winning, but one of the trusts is going to win out in that situation. So anyway, lots of different dynamics with that, and I'm letting Kate in. So if any of you want to, well,
Can you clarify, Kim, in that story about getting really onto the trailer? Did you actually have to use the straps around the haunches, or did he finally walk up? I couldn't quite tell from the writing.
well, it was really interesting. So we rigged the strap, we put it, I think it did touch him, but as soon as he noticed what we were doing and the rope kind of went around him and he sort of checked all that out, he knew, he put two and two together that was
What
going
I
to,
figured.
yeah, it didn't really take much pressure, and he just was like hopped in. But it certainly wasn't his choice. He was kind of had that stance of, we've all had it, where like, if you think I'm going to volunteer to do this, you're crazy. You know, you're gonna have to make me, right? That was kind of what it was. And it was just giving him the chance to stand in that truth of, yeah, I see this was, you know, you weren't going to volunteer to do this, but we're going to do it. Yeah. Yeah. Good question.
Well, the story itself, I remember reading it and thinking immediately of all my years teaching. When you're desperately trying to maneuver a classroom and individuals, and you have a lot of resistance every single day, especially from certain individuals. And as prepared as you might be to try to help them see, it was kind of like really looking at you and saying, no way, lady, I'm not going to do that. And how, you know, learning as a young teacher, and I was in urban schools, downtown Syracuse and downtown Boston, for my first learning experiences as a teacher. So it was, I had to learn in a big hurry, you know, how to manipulate these kids without feeling like they were manipulated, or that I felt like I was manipulating them, because I didn't want that either.
Right.
So the whole issue of trust is a huge one as a teacher in any situation, I think. But that was my own personal reaction that came to me when I was reading that section.
And man, I mean, just thinking about a classroom, like I had one horse I was having a conversation with. A classroom full of children is a bunch of different individuals, right? I mean, how hard is it to get a lot of different people of any age on the same page about something, right? That's a very,
Well, especially when you have a lot of students coming from abusive and poverty-stricken homes where they don't trust anybody, not alone a new young teacher in their classroom. Why would they trust her? White, you know, you had a lot of things going against you.
exactly. And in that
Yeah.
situation with Rayleigh too, you know, I don't know. I know he'd been on a lot of trailers and had bad situations. I don't know if he'd ever had somebody, because another theory that I've had people say is, well, if you really have it in your heart that you have his best interest in mind and he should trust you, that he'll trust you, right? And maybe someone who's had a history of trusting and that working out well, absolutely. But someone, individual, horse or human, who has had experiences where I trusted and then it didn't go well, is going to have a harder time doing that. Or if, I don't know if Rayleigh had ever had anybody try to talk to him or even tell him, trust me or not. Like if you've never even had a human try to have that conversation with you, how do you know to trust it or not? Because you have no context for it. So same with you, there's different children coming from different histories, different situations. So it's pretty amazing that teachers ever get children on the same page.
without using the strap.
Yeah, and sometimes in the past they did. But anyway, okay, great, thank you. That's a really powerful, I don't want to say analogy, but
It was just a connection that I made.
connection. Mhm.
Yeah.
So Kate just joined us. Kate, we've had everybody else introduce themselves. So why don't you just real quick, in case there's folks watching this who haven't watched the past ones.
Okay. Hi. Sorry, I'm late. So I'm Kate. I work with horses primarily as a volunteer in rescue and sanctuary. And I'm also working with a trainer recently, working just on groundwork using her business is called, I don't know if I told you this, Kim, her business is called Heart-Centered Horsemanship. So she uses a mix of like equestrian yoga, body work, and kind of liberty-based training. And so I've just been doing groundwork, trying to get more skilled at that so I can do better working with the horses at the rescue, but that's been really good. So anyway, that's what I've been doing. And I've known Kim for a little over 2 years, I guess. And
And where
Yeah.
are you? Where are you?
oh, right. I'm in North Carolina, Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kate. All right, let's go. Mary, do you have any thoughts you want to share about this chapter, this lesson?
Trust is a huge issue for me, because I've made very poor choices in my life. And, you know, listening to my gut is, do I trust my gut also? Or is that protecting me from the next issue? So I found your story about Rayleigh so interesting, and that communication that he could sense. I thought that was just interesting. And then the Shoki part too. I just, that is just something I've never really experienced. But I think definitely because of my anxiety issues, the horses picked it up, and probably been part of my problem with connecting with them as I would like to. But that has been something I've learned in this process with you, that I wasn't so aware that they could sense all that. I knew, I'd always heard that they knew if you were afraid. And I usually wasn't afraid, but I didn't know the anxiety was like beaming off me like a moonbeam, So it's been very interesting.
I'm so glad you brought up anxiety, because in the sessions, 2 of the sessions I had this week was specifically that, where the person said, I honestly don't know if it's my gut or anxiety, right? So if you have these these feelings that maybe, your gut's trying to tell you something's off, or is it just my anxiety? So I want to get into that a little bit more, like, how do you tell the difference between those two things? And horses definitely know the difference. And usually when we're anxious, I think you and I have talked about this, we tend to be a little incongruent, like, and that's, I think, more what they're responding to than any like judgment about anxiety. It's just that there's, you don't know how you feel. Right? So how do they know who you are? So there's this feeling that they're just not getting
connecting
signal from a connected, clear signal. Yeah, great point about, we will circle back to anxiety. Yeah. All right, Anna.
Yeah, so all of those resonate, but I think, when I read it, I was really thinking about what came to my mind was trying to help people, with their horses. And I hate to use the term teach people riding, because I feel like that's not exactly what I do, but most of the people that I work with are coming from, and horses are coming, from, I don't know if you want to call it an abusive background, but a not congruent background. So the people are very much into following direction and not at all trusting their gut, not even thinking about their gut.
Sometimes not even present in their bodies either.
Oh, right, right. So, it's a huge thing on like, to try to get people to trust that you're not like, when you have the feeling you want to have, you're going to know, right? And everybody, especially people coming from the competitive side of things, they think that this is the feeling they should have. They have a perception of it, but they've never had it, so they don't really know it, but they don't trust themselves to know what and it's like, and I get it because I sort of came from that realm too, so I understand it. And I'm like, but you just have to kind of trust that you are going to know it when you feel it. And then when you do it, a lot of people, they sort of just gloss over it because they're not really sure if that was the thing or not. So rather than like slowing down and then reveling in it, like, oh yeah, that, even if it was fleeting, it's like, that was it. They miss it and then they go over it and then it's not saved, in their mind or the horse's mind or whatever. And then, but then I thought about that and I'm like, well, that's, I think, true of just people in general, because, a lot of people don't trust their own intuition about things. And
Mhm.
then, it's like you have the right feeling and then you're kind of like, oh, but that's not what the feeling that I should have. So, because that's not what XYZ says I should have.
Yeah, we're more focused on what we think we should have. So,
Right.
and I think most riders, I don't know if they're starting with you, but I know I was always taught, you're taught the positions to be
Right.
in,
Right.
where to put your leg, your foot. Like I wasn't taught in the beginning to feel in connection with my horse. Like it was all about sitting correctly and putting your heels down and do this and hold the reins like this, put your fingers that way, right?
Right.
That's all getting you in your head about there's a way you're supposed to do this.
Right.
And Kate, with
Right.
training, I remember
Right.
I remember one time helping some folks load a horse that was having a hard time loading. At the time I was doing Pirelli, so they had the orange carrot stick that I was using to communicate. And oh no, I know what it was. We went to their house and I didn't have my stick or anything. There was a broom. So I used a broom that they had. And later on, I got a message from them about this magic broom. Like to them, it was about the broom was the reason that the horse
Right.
got on, versus that it was a tool I used to extend some communication. I was still reading the energy and being in the moment, but to them it was the tool or
Right.
technique. Oh, I should have stood like this, and then
Right.
the horse would understand. And sometimes we're taught that way, like this body position will help you, but we're very rarely taught to feel our way through it in the
Mhm.
horse industry. And I don't know, Kate, maybe this is a good segue to you're working on that kind of stuff right now. Are you being taught or encouraged to trust yourself as you're learning to work with the horses?
Yes and no. So, this teacher, we're working one-on-one. It's like we're in a barter situation. So like she knows about my background and sort of what I've been doing. And she actually has taught at this horsemanship at the same rescue where I'm working right now. So she has an idea of what the situation is there. So she has been focusing with me, she's been focusing more on technique, and kind of like physically how to communicate what you want to do in a way that the horse can understand. And it's actually an interesting question because that is kind of her thing. But like my experience with her, because I've videotaped and photographed a lot of her clinics, is that she focuses more on kind of, she talks a lot about body organization in horses. So it's like, how can I help this horse organize himself so that he can pick up this foot easily? Like how can I help him loosen this muscle and balance, here? So she's really, I would say that she is really more technical, even though she's it's really hard for me to describe what she does exactly. But I experience her as being more technical than like really talking about connection primarily.
Well, and I think probably that's a lot of that is just based in the nature of, like Kathy said, as a teacher in the classroom, you have an agenda, you have to,
Mhm.
a goal you have to accomplish.
Yeah.
In that kind of horse training and work, it doesn't ever really start from what does the horse want? Like, we know what
Yeah.
we're trying to get the horse to do, and it's our idea. So the horse has to trust us or learn to,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
It isn't really about the horse being in tune with itself much at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say that this teacher focuses more, and maybe this is also because it's what I'm bringing to it. She focuses more on like, it is your responsibility as the human student to figure out how to communicate with them in a way that makes sense to them. It's not like you're going to make them do what you want them to do, and they're going to have to figure it out from what you're doing. You know,
Right.
it's like you're going to have to learn how to position, if you're riding, like how to position your body in a way that's congruent, makes sense to them, instead of using like increasing amounts of force to try to make them do what you want. So anyway, you know, like coming back to the anxiety thing, like I think it's actually a really interesting, what popped into my mind, you know, and like we talk so much about congruence and sort of presence, Kim, like my experience with anxiety, and I have a lot of it, is that, you know, it is very overgeneralized, and there's a lot of rumination that I do. And so when I'm in a really anxious state, I don't even know what I'm anxious about a lot of the time. You know, it's like, and to a horse, I guess it's probably like, well, what is this even like? What's your deal? Like, are you actually anxious about what's happening between me and you? Or are you anxious about like politics? Like, is it the entire world? You know, and it's like, I think it's almost impossible to trust your gut when you're in an anxious state, a generalized anxious state, because like you can't even focus your attention that much on what you're feeling. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Yeah, so like I actually never really thought about it that way before, but yeah, it's like that anxiety state just completely takes you out of whatever experience you're having.
Yeah.
And like, you know, horses always bring us back to paying attention to that or not, and then, you know, maybe not so great things happen. Not to laugh about it. Yeah.
That brings up another layer. Like, do we have to, and I think I've known this, but haven't really put it in these words. I think we have to be present or embodied in order to listen to our intuition, because it is in our, for me anyway, it is a feeling in my body that I'm listening to. I don't know.
Right.
Have any thoughts about that?
Well, I have kind of an interesting story about that happened today. I was so my parents graciously took my children, and they're keeping them until Thursday. And I have a lady that I help, and she's out of town for the week, so I'm working with her horse. And I told her the horse is kind of recovering from some injury stuff. So I told her, you know, I'm probably going to do Monday, Tuesday, and then Thursday, Friday. And then today I had to, you know, drop my kiddos off. And then I had another friend coming who was riding with me and then doing some body work on the horses. And this schedule was kind of up in the air, you know, and it was like, that was making me anxious already. And then I had, and then it's raining on and off. So when my friend left, I was like, when she was leaving, it wasn't raining. And I was like, you know what, if I grab, like, you know, I hadn't had lunch yet. It's like almost 2 o'clock. And I'm like, if I grab like a protein bar and get something to drink really quick, I can run over and I can work with this horse. And then, you know, then I can come home and I can do the other stuff I want to work on and da 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 da. And as I came walking up to the house, it started raining again. And I'm like, so I'm looking at the radar and I'm like, is it going to last? Is it not? Is it what? Is it? And, you know, then I was like, okay, here's the thing. This horse has some history, has some baggage, needs you to be calm and present and there and paying attention. And if you run over there and you're worried about, is it going to rain? Is it not going to rain? I'm in a hurry. Like, you're going to be not in
present.
a good state, right? So there's no reason that you cannot go over there tomorrow, right? When it's not supposed to rain. So I was like, okay, like, like, and again, same thing. Like, I don't even know what I'm anxious about at this point, because there really is nothing to be anxious about. Like, my kids are taken care of. My horses are taken care of this evening by my working student. Like, I have things that I want to do, but I really, there was nothing that I was like, but I was still, anyway.
So after you made that decision, how did you feel?
Oh, then I felt much better. Then I was like, okay, I need to like power nap, like a little power nap meditation, whatever, so I can get over it and go on. And then it was fine, and then I'm like, okay, but it was just like, because I was sort of ramping myself up, for no reason. But I think it's so hard, it's so hard to be present and realize that and kind of go through that.
So what was interesting, what I picked out of that, of what you trusted yourself with, was when you really sat and said, the truth at the heart of all this is that if I'm not present with this horse anyway,
right,
I'm not doing a service to him or me, right? So that was sort of like the truth of your trusting yourself to know that is a truth, right? And so then I can let it go. Right. Yeah, that's interesting.
And I think it's hard for people that are, that come from that background of, like Kate's teacher. I mean, it's so, I find myself, I've kind of, in the last few months, I've really kind of let it go. And I'm like, you know what, if people think I'm nuts, they think I'm nuts. But it's like Warwick Schiller calls it the woo. Like, we need to sit and talk about the woo for a second, because that's what's getting in your way as far as connecting with your horse. Like, it's the woo. But I think it's true for just people to people interactions too, because we're so technical and we're so focused on, rather than what Eckhart Tolle in the Power of Now. Like, I had to get this book again from the library so I could listen to it. But because it resonates, I get it more now than when I read it before. But like, that talking being to being is something that we don't do. And a lot of people think you're nuts when you say that. So,
And I'm just going to make one connection, talking being to being, when we were talking to ourselves, being to being also, right? Like, we're not even thinking of ourselves as a being. So Mary, like, when we're anxious, I don't think we're connecting with that being that's ourselves.
right.
Yeah.
Another observation, just listen to all of us. We all seem to be very sensitive people, because we can feel this stuff. And being sensitive, you're going to have more anxiety, and you're going to pick up on all the shit a lot more than most people. So we are living wonderful, sensitive lives, but we're also on the other side of being absolutely crazy trying to live in it. That's the way I feel anyway.
Yeah.
I'm thankful for being sensitive, but I was just like, whoa.
Got to protect that too. It's a lot. Yeah.
Right. And I feel like people are probably the same way. I'll have to start noticing more with people, but like, I feel like with horses, those really sensitive ones, they're either like really, the explosive ones that nobody's going to deal with, they're dangerous, blah, blah, blah. Or they're the really introverted ones that have just shut it down because it's too much. And so like, I was actually having a discussion about a horse the friend of mine was working on today, who I think he's a little bit in between. Like, he's very sensitive, but he has moments of expressiveness, but then moments of he's just you know. And his person is an interesting mix. So it's like, so I was like, I need to sort of challenge myself to realize with people, like, are they maybe shut down because like Mary said,
It's too much.
they're sensitive, like there's so much anxiety, you just have to shut it down. Because I think I'm a little bit like that, to be honest. I think that's me.
Definitely like that. I found that out with this COVID stuff and trying to come back into the world. I just can't bear a lot of stuff anymore. And I just said, whoa, I gotta go. Can't do
Mhm.
it. And I don't know why, if it's getting older and that is so much more, feel it more now than I did before. I was so busy before, I didn't get down to being that sensitive. I just rolled over it and kept rolling on,
Yep.
and now
Mhm.
I don't, and I feel so much more.
Mhm.
I just have to shut it down.
Mhm.
I
Mm,
think that's been a common statement after a lot of people have had COVID and trying to get back in, especially if there's an age element involved. I've heard that a fair amount,
Hmm.
where it's just too hard to deal with it all. And you kind of start wondering, why am I trying to deal with it all?
Yeah.
I think that's a big question. I think we all have felt, I mean, I was a very, very active teacher, and then I went into special education and ran my own business for students with acquired brain injuries. And I think that I did for 25 years, and that period of time in my life taught me a lot, because I was working on that one-to-one relationship, probably not too differently than a horse. People who had been very injured, injured to the point that they weren't the same person that they had been the day before they were injured. So you were dealing with a lot. And then I was supposed to also be getting them through their schoolwork. So, what came first was the person. Um, and that became paramount to me. If we didn't get through school stuff, we didn't get through school stuff. And I would deal with the teachers in the school and the administration and take that on my shoulders. But you have a person to deal with first. And I don't think that's any different than when you're dealing with a horse.
absolutely.
You've got to be present. You've got to be present enough to, you kind of have to know yourself first before you can give to that other person and help them bring that out. I think whether that's a student or whether that's a horse or another person in our, in a relationship.
That's a really, really great point.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think to that point, like you're making me really think, like I think my children have really sort of pushed me over the edge on this like journey to know myself and figure out, because I was very much like Mary said, like I'm just going to be busy. I'm going to power through. I mean, 911 dispatching, all the crap. I'm just powering through. I'm powering through. My horse was like that was my time, my safe haven, my whatever. And I would do that and then I would power through the rest. And then I had kids and
Whoa.
holy mother, you can't power through that. Like there's no, and I don't want to raise my kids with, I mean, I say my anxiety is not that bad. I mean, I've had ulcers, like it's bad. I'm lying. It, like, I mean, but I'm a functional human, but it's, I have glanced over it. I have powered through, and I don't want to raise my kids like that. Like I want them to know, like, address those things. And, so that's really, and one thing that I have a hard time with is I do not trust myself to relax around my kids. Like we have fun, we do fun things, but I don't
Mm.
Because, they don't stop. They're constant. Mom, 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 whatever it is. And I haven't surrendered to that yet. It's like, and
Yes.
I want to, but it's like, once you hear mom 50 times, your anxiety is up, right? Right. Like, oh, so
We've
it's,
all been there.
yes. And it's so funny, I just, I sent my mom a message and I'm like, I need time. I need a break, and she gets it, because she's been there too. So, and because a lot of times my in-laws also, they take them twice a week. But what I do is I pack in all the things that I don't think I can do.
Not really relaxing or.
Right. So
Yeah.
I'm not like, there's no self-care there. And I've gotten better about it, but it's like, yeah, just that whole thing is really, I need to trust that I can relax, and I need to, figure out how I can teach them to trust themselves to, they're getting there, but like, just, they don't need me for everything. They can, do some things on their own, and they can,
Yeah.
and they're getting there, but it's, they're 4 and 5, so whatever.
Oh,
Well,
my goodness.
yeah.
Right.
Got some time yet.
Right. 4 and gonna be 6 in a month,
Yeah,
but
and boys, yeah. But
Yeah.
Anna, this ties into, I guess we'll get into a little bit later in some of this chapters too, but because I think, how do horse moms do it? Right. One is the children have much more responsibility on themselves, but the other is that they're raised in a herd.
yeah.
And it's the older siblings that are often, and the father often doing, there's this, we as I think human mothers particularly, it's not natural, I think, how much responsibility falls on the mother just for parenting, and then we've got job and work and everything else. And we've all equated like equal rights with being able to do all these things, but we haven't shifted how do we deal with kids being raised. And even when it was just mom staying at home, I don't think that was really a good model, right? I think we are communal beings, and so yeah, we're not really, I guess I'm trying to say, give yourself a little bit of a break. You do have to figure out how to cope well and take care of yourself. Also, asking for help is okay, because you aren't supposed to be
Right.
able to do it all by yourself.
Right. But I think that's such a thing that we, and I don't even know if it's all humans. I mean, it's definitely our country, and maybe most of the modern world. But I know, like, I have Amish friends, and I think they have 5 kids, maybe more than that. Most of them are grown now, but it's very much that the older siblings take care of the younger ones. And if they all, even when the older kids grow up, even if they don't all continue to live on the same property or in the same house, they're very close by. So it's all everything is communal, and I just think that makes a very big difference. And horse mothers, there are times when they're like, they tell the folk, just get away from me, like, go over there, be away from me.
Right.
And I think we've been taught, at least as Americans, oh God, you can't do that because your kids will feel neglected, or whatever. Yeah, but there's times when you have to say, you can do this, you can entertain yourself, or you can go play with your brother, or
Your
something
sisters or
else,
your
like,
cousins or something else. Like,
exactly right. You
in the
have
wild
to,
horse community, there's lots of others, right? There's usually
right,
somebody who's up for paying attention right
right,
now. They still have
right.
to learn boundaries, but
Well,
I think
that's a great time to learn them, right? Like,
everybody's different, right? I can't treat
Right.
this person this way or that person. Like you
Yeah.
learn that there's nuances.
In a way, it kind of all comes back to the issue of trust too. I think there's a lot of moms who worry whether, if I let my kids, be at preschool all day, or if I let them over at that parent's, or I let them at this grandparent's house, can I trust those
Yeah.
other sources to be with my kids, and not just maybe in a safe way, but what are they teaching them? What are the values that are coming out from that other home or that other environment? So in a way, it fits into this chapter on trust. Of how do you trust that outside community to give to your children?
Yeah.
And there's even some good examples of the horses, of how they delve some of that out.
I
Yeah.
think
I would-
this, oh, go ahead. Go ahead, Mary. Yeah.
I was just thinking about when I had my stepson, and I felt so responsible for being sure that he had everything kind of lined out. He was safe, that I was doing everything I need to do for him. I had no concept of taking care of myself. And I wish that I had known that I needed to tell him, I need this space. You can take care of yourself. You can do this. Give him that confidence that he can do that. And I have to stop. I have to do this for me. So he will learn to do that too.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I see him now, and he is so hyper vigilant with his children. And I can see me doing that to him when I had him. It's like, oh my God, the poor man is so anxious. It's like, stop it. So, just, when they're as young as yours are, it's hard to say, talk to them like, man, mom needs a break. But I think they really get it. And I think they really appreciate you being human and you aren't super everything. I think they really like that.
Well, this makes me think about two things. One, I think they do understand. Two, yes, what gets modeled, they learn. If we learn anything from horses, is that most of it is learned experientially. They don't have all our words,
Right.
right? So it is learned experientially. And trying to not lose my thought where I was, but two things that came to mind from my own experience in counseling. Well, one was in counseling and one was coming from an unhealthy relationship to a healthy relationship. The one in counseling was, I've always been super messy, right? I'm like, and always got in trouble for it, because I was a mess, right? My room was trash. Two things that came interesting out of that was, one time my therapist said, well, interestingly, that's usually a control thing. You don't feel in control of anything else, but you can control your mess in your space, right? So I was like, ooh, that's deep. Never really thought about that. But the other one was, she asked me this question that was like, she's like, did anyone ever teach you how to enjoy taking care of your things and cleaning your things and organizing? I was like, what? That's just a task you have to do, right? Like, it never even occurred to me that you could enjoy that. Some people enjoy that. Or that you can be taught to enjoy that, right? So that was interesting, at that being taught to do something on your own, but then, or to taught to enjoy it, right? Not just go clean up your room, but like, how can this be almost fun or enjoyable to you? But then the other was, having been in a really codependent relationship with a lot of kids have toward their parents, like, I need attention, I need attention, I need attention, I need attention. I was in a relationship where my ex was like overbearing, controlling, right? Everything. I didn't have any space. And all I used to dream about was having some space to myself, time and space. But because I'd been so conditioned in that codependent relationship and way of being, that when I got in a healthier relationship and my new partner wasn't texting me all the time and calling me all the time and checking in on me, where I felt like he was being very unattentive and got angry with that and wondered what the heck he was doing, paying attention to, and he wasn't paying attention to me, right? And he beautifully, one time when I got snippy about it, just said, very calmly, "Do you know what I wish?" And I said, "What?" And he said, "I wish you could enjoy the time you have to yourself when we're not together." And I was like, holy crap, that's all I ever used to wish about. Right. And now I'm spending that time wishing. So again, it's like, is there a way to even talk to young children about, you get to have this time to do whatever within reason, safe, whatever. Maybe there's some things that they get to now go do while you're having your time that they get to do. I don't know, this learning that it's a gift when we actually don't have to be attended to by anybody or attend to anyone. And those are things that I don't think we teach or model in the human world very well.
No, and
Nor
it's
do you
funny.
often encourage it. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that because, well, I mean, we are working on, like, one of my kids is kind of still a napper. The other one just lows naps. He's kind of like me. I mean, I was never a napper either, but now it's like it's more like a meditative, like I just need my alone time. Like if it's a half hour or wherever. So we are working on that. And he's actually very like that's the older one. He's pretty in tune to that because he likes his own alone time. We're the same like that, so that's nice. But when you're talking about enjoying taking care of things, I'm always messy too, but what's not messy is my barn. And my first long-term instructor, I don't know how she did it, but she taught me that that was sort of you time. It was important time, cleaning the stalls and sweeping. And as much as it seems like tedious work, it's something to be proud of. It's something to, and so she taught me that. And that stuck with me. And even my next instructor that I was with for a very long time, and we horse showed and did all kinds of it, he was the total opposite. And he used to drive me nuts. And I was always the clean person and keeping control of the tack room and the everything, and so it's interesting that like somehow she taught me that. Meanwhile, at home, I did not, it was always go clean your room or whatever. And I didn't.
We don't learn to enjoy it. And
Yeah. So it's interesting. I have to
even for
ponder
me,
that
sometimes
one.
like with the manure, I like the metaphor of I'm cleaning the shit out of my life, right? Twice a day. And there's something physical about it that's awesome. And look how great that feels. And so I sometimes
Right?
even try to be like, because I hate cleaning my house, be like, oh, maybe I can try to have the same mindset about how good that feels to like,
Right.
up your inner space or whatever. I don't know, but there's different ways for different people that we could learn to enjoy that. But it's very hard once I've learned to think of it as a chore or something that I don't
Right.
like to do. It's very hard to switch that over. And I know we got way off of trust, but trusting.
I think it all ties in. I think it all ties in. Like
be with yourself, right? And yeah, be present with yourself is all related to trust, I guess.
yeah.
Well, you have to know yourself so that you can trust yourself.
Yeah.
You
Mhm.
have to, as someone said, I think Mary said, you have to kind of keep yourself in the moment.
Mm.
When you were talking about the horses and sometimes the anxiety getting the best of riders that you bring in, or maybe yourselves riding, it brought back memories of, I had three girls all within 4 years, so they were very close in ages. And I remember we took them out to Maine, and I think the oldest one was, wow, she couldn't have been over 5. So I think they were about 5, 3, and 1. And my husband says, I think we should all put them on horses. Of course, I panicked. I said, oh my God, they can't go on horses. They're so little. And the 3 of them got on those horses. I had to hide myself so they didn't see my anxiety. They could care less. They were not anxious. They went on those horses and they weren't they weren't all ponies either, and they hugged those horses and they cried when they got off of them. And, it was a beautiful experience just to watch them be in the moment. And I had, as I said, I just had to hide behind a tree and, let them do what they did naturally. And I think that's that being in the moment, that we can get back to those times. Those are beautiful times.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you made me think about too, when you were talking about children and, people not trusting other people and things like that. Like, I mean, that's one of the things, at work, like, I- I- the craziness that people bring up into that, I mean, last week I had a lady and her mother who held on to the door handles of the ex-husband's pickup truck as he was driving away because he put a 1-year-old in a front-facing car seat and they didn't think that that was the right thing to do. Now they could have gotten killed doing that. And I'm like, at the same time, you trusted this man enough to have a child with him. I understand that relationship has deteriorated. Okay. I get it. But at the same time, like, like
The layers of like
yeah, what
all the times that those people probably didn't trust themselves before they got to that moment
right.
are just
Yeah. I'm like, wow. I mean, that's just, yeah, they don't. And I think, my husband and I are not big church people. I mean, I feel like I'm a spiritual person. He has his, beliefs or whatever, but we're definitely not big church people. And my oldest has been going to Sunday school with my in-laws. And yeah, sometimes he learns some different things, but we, like we talk about it and it's fine. And I think it's good. Like, I think they need to have that. It's not like, just because they learn about something, doesn't
not
mean
have
that
the cooties necessarily from learning it.
right. Or they're not just gonna, latch onto that as the thing, I mean, I went to Sunday school too.
Trust them to have some judgment as they
Right.
yeah.
I went to Sunday school too as a child, and I just have different,
Functioning.
yeah, like so it's really interesting. I think, yeah, like trusting yourself and then trusting other people to,
And
Yeah.
trusting the child.
yeah,
Trusting
Trusting that your son will ask questions or come to you if something is presented that's different to him.
right. And this age, if you don't shut down the question mode,
they will ask.
right, it's just gonna be never ending. So, but I think maybe a lot of kids that just gets quashed because people are like, don't ask me.
No time.
Then they don't trust themselves to ask questions. So then we've started
Sorry,
our
but-
own vicious cycle.
Yeah. Well, that got me to one of the questions that I had written down was, do animals ever, so we try to convince animals to trust us more than they trust themselves. We do it a lot, right? We think, you can trust me to get on that trailer, right? We do it all the time. You can trust me to put this saddle on. Trust me. And we use positive and negative reinforcement to get trust. Is it trust? I'm not really sure. But anyway, maybe it is. But do animals ever try to convince us not to trust ourselves? Have you ever had an animal, any kind of animal, try to tell you not to trust yourself? Can you think of a situation? So this is a control thing.
Yeah. So when you mean trust yourself, do you mean trust your mind or trust your being?
I was thinking more of like, if I'm scared and I was like, run or whatever, would my dog or my cat or my horse ever try to say, don't be scared? More likely they'd be like, what are we scared of for a second?
Right.
Then they trust themselves to go, okay, she can be scared, but I don't need to be scared. Like, I couldn't really think of it. Go ahead.
I don't know whether it's the same thing, but I have tried to walk my daughter's dog twice when I've left the house. He's a fairly large Portuguese water dog, so he can be quite persistent in what he wants. But even not being out of my house very long, thunderstorms have come up on 2 different occasions. No, sorry, definitely thunderstorm on one time. And it spooked him. And he wouldn't go forward. This was last summer. And I looked at him and I said, well, we got to go home. I mean, we were 4 blocks from home. I said, we got to keep going. And he wouldn't go forward. So, we kind of looked at each other's eyes and I said, okay, what if we go backwards? And he looked at me and he trusted me, obviously, that I'd come up with some kind of solution. And I started walking backwards and he came with me. And I thought that was a really interesting thing. And then the same thing, almost in the same location. And I kind of wondered, it was a few weeks ago when I was walking him. And I didn't hear an external noise, but he must have heard something, because all of a sudden he just sat down and he wasn't going any further. And there wasn't any thunderstorm. I couldn't figure out what had spooked him, but something had. And again, I got down on my knees and I just looked in his eyes and I said, should we go backwards? And there was just, it's kind of like Kim was describing in that chapter, them kind of looking at the eyes. And I got up and started walking backwards and he came with me. So I don't really know what that was all about. I never researched it, but
I'm almost wondering if it wasn't just the fact that you stopped to acknowledge that, okay, you're not comfortable with this situation. Let's try something else. Maybe even just that acknowledging that you weren't telling him, oh, get over it, come on, right? You were at least acknowledging how he felt, which is letting him trust himself. So then maybe then he trusted you to do something different. I don't know.
if that was exactly what you were asking. You were asking more.
Well, I was asking more like, yeah, if you had been walking and you told the dog
That I was scared.
I don't want to go any further.
Yeah, it was the opposite. Yeah, I see that.
Yeah. And if you're attached to the dog might try to pull you. But I would guess I'm saying if the dog's not attached to you and you stop, would the dog ever get you to do something you weren't inclined to do? Maybe to give me a treat, but that's a different kind of dynamic. I'm really just trying to think. So animals, the nature's way would be, you're supposed to trust yourself, right? And nobody really ever encourages you not to, which is a very different experience than we have in the human world. But from young children, we're taught to do what other people are telling us to do, right? Whether we're inclined to, or we want to, or we feel safe doing it, or whatever else. So we're kind of taught really early. But animals function quite well, so you don't have to. It's possible to let everybody trust themselves and things still get done. People still get along. Like we can all decide that, yeah, it makes sense to go over here, and nobody's forcing anybody else. We're just all trusting ourselves and one another that this is a good thing to go do together. I don't know. It really got me thinking about.
I was sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Kim.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I'm having a hard time being present because I have a really sick dog here and I'm worried about him. But he just So this is my big, he's 88 pounds right now, but he's been like 105, 110 pounds. He's a big dog, big, strong dog. And anyway, like he just went from sounding like he was about to die to like running up the stairs, running back down and trying to like wrestle with the other dogs. So I don't know what the hell's going on. Anyway, but it got me thinking about him, because I was like, what possible situation could there be where, an animal tries to coerce a person into doing something they don't trust? And like, it's not necessarily the same thing, but it's kind of the same thing. Like, he used to be extremely dog reactive. I mean, like scary dog reactive, would knock me over, pull me over, trying to get at another dog. And, if he had been able to, certainly would have dragged me over into getting into a terrible fight with another dog, which happened one time in my house with the foster dog who was in the house. So I know like what it looks like and what he actually was willing to do when he got into one of those situations. So I don't know. I'm like, is that the same thing? Like,
Well, you're attached to him.
I've tried to get a horse to do something a horse didn't want to do. And like, I'm in a position where I don't have to do that. It's like, I'm not trying to ride a horse. I'm not trying to train a horse. When I'm trying to do something with a horse, it is like to get it into a place where I can feed it, or to medicate it, or to like deal with some safety issue. Like, those are really the only times I'm trying to make, quote unquote, make a horse do something. But like, I'm still trying to get it to do something I want it to do, and like my dog was trying to get me to do something that he wanted to do. So I'm like, it's not a completely unheard of situation.
But again, both of those situations, you're attached, right?
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
if you weren't attached to your dog, he'd have gone and done his thing.
Oh
and
yeah.
Left you to do your thing. So this
Yep.
being attached is a little bit different.
Yeah.
Others will pick up young animals like by the scruff of the neck or whatever. But once the young animal is kind of old enough to make its own decisions,
Yeah.
and I even think about like medicating, in the natural world, each individual learns how to self-medicate with plants and different things. I mean,
Mhm.
maybe they learn from each other, but one animal doesn't usually medicate the other. I don't
Yeah.
know about others with young babies, but there's a lot of this learning how to take care of yourself and trust yourself. And if your
Mhm.
stomach hurts, you'll go find what helps your stomach, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things in the human world that kids can't have access to those things. It's not safe, so they don't learn to take care of it themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. Anyway, that was just an interesting thought to me, was that, is that only a purely human thing where we try to convince others not to trust themselves or to trust us more than they trust themselves?
Hmm.
Largely.
I think people do that to each other. I think animals are more honest and don't try to really hurt others. I think people do that, but animals are basically trying to live and eat and sleep, and I don't think they have an agenda really.
That's not necessarily true.
Oh, well, yeah,
I don't
maybe.
know. I mean, I see horses fight, like I've been working with a horse she was just put down finally last week, but, has been terribly sick for a long time and was bullied relentlessly by a lot of other horses. And like, I was just reading about, like I follow orca because I'm really into orcas, and like, there was an orca, like they will kill porpoises for fun. They don't eat them, they just kill them. They torture them and throw them in the air and play with them, and then they kill them. And then this orca just like I don't know if you all, there was a news story several years ago about an orca who, like, her baby died and she carried it for many weeks, I mean months. So like one of the orcas, completely different situation, they had killed this porpoise and she was carrying it around, I don't know for days. So like, I think we have to be a little careful about, saying like, well, animals are just always not, I'm trying to think of the right phrase. Not good natured is not the right phrase. Like they do not always deal in good faith with each other either. You know,
Yes.
like
There-
there's
there was
bullying in the
definitely-
animal world and
There's
Yeah.
definitely dysfunction in the animal world, and some of it is human created and some of it is not human created. So yeah, I think there is dysfunction. It would be interesting to, know the whole context of what was going on in that situation.
Mhm.
That's obviously kind of deviant behavior, but yeah, deviant behavior or yeah, I don't know what to call or how to label it, but
Yeah.
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, but I mean, I'm curious, like there are sort of reproductively oriented, it's like lions, like lions, when a male lion comes into a pride, drives off, an existing male lion from a pride, and now he has taken over and he has this whatever harem of lionesses. Many times they will kill nursing young because and that is because they want the females to go back into heat so they can reproduce. So it's like, that's a horrible thing, but it is driven by a biological imperative.
Mhm.
And I don't think that's only like, I think I've heard of that in primates as well. I'm not sure, but I don't know. It's like, there's like that at least has some kind of a biological or just like reproductive drive behind it. Whereas, yeah, like, I don't know if orcas would just do that in the wild if they were not stressed by human
Or maybe not even
interference
human,
notions or
who knows what, right? Yeah.
and I don't know if horses bully, I don't know if horses bully sick and dying other horses when they're out in wild herds unfettered by human interact. I don't know. But it's certainly something I observe more dealing with this large herd of, some very healthy horses and some very sick horses.
And it is very dangerous for us at any time to study behavior in situations that aren't natural and
Yep.
wonder, I've heard things like older horses sometimes they start to, they might get left behind and the herd won't wait for them. So then they are prone to get killed. Is that better than bullying? Is that worse? Do horses in the domestic settings recognize that this horse is a liability? Like, is the
Yeah.
horse wanting to pass, but humans are keeping it alive with extra food? Like,
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
very hard to know what dynamics are at play in those
Yeah.
situations, except to honor that if we really want to understand wild animal behavior, we do need to study it in purely
Yeah.
wild states. Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
Well, that makes me think, Kate, makes me think of like dogs and random small animals. I mean, bunnies, squirrels, whatever. I mean, a lot of times they, will chase them, and if they catch them, they
Play them to death.
play with them. You
Yeah,
know,
cats
they
too.
don't eat
but-
them. They
Yep.
just play with them. And so, I mean, is that an inherent play drive?
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
and the orcas are way bigger than the porpoises. Maybe they're like the bunnies, and they're like, look, play with this dude, because I don't think the dogs do it with malice.
Right.
It's just like, oh, look at that, and
Yeah.
I don't know, again.
Yeah. It's not like
something
they're
that-
defending a territory like they might with another dog, like against a bunny. Yeah.
Right, but it's like they catch a bunny and they're throwing it around, or a mouse, a cat with a mouse.
Yeah.
A lot of times they'll play with them. They don't eat them. They just play with them. It's
Yeah.
so is that an inherent play drive? Maybe we don't understand. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
I don't know.
interesting.
Let's bring it back around to trust. Like,
Okay.
what,
Sorry.
where does trust? No, because I think these are all great questions, and I don't know that we know all the answers, right? To what?
So, well, like, okay, so then, God, like, I mean, I hate to like, I hate to almost, give something that's terrible like a positive feel, but if we think if we take that and we say that, animals have this inherent play drive, would, a bullying situation with somebody who's not been taught, because a lot of times we can teach our dogs, don't eat the bunnies, like
Yeah.
call them back or whatever. Is that like a play drive gone wild? Like,
Where the dog is trusting its instincts.
right. So I
to
mean,
play
is
or
it,
run
is,
or what.
with a human, is it sort of our instinct to play with other people in that
Mhm.
way?
The only thing that makes me think of is back to the boundaries. Like, I don't think there's, I think any communal being is probably driven to interact, right, in whatever ways, and it becomes about it's between the two individuals to work out what's okay between
Sure.
them, right? And between a bunny and a dog,
Mm.
physically one's not going to really have as much chance of establishing those boundaries if it can't get away.
Right. But is that where we get that bully mentality from in people? Sometimes I don't, again, I hate to put like any sort of positive spin on something that's negative, but it's like, if we're talking about trusting our inherent instinct, is that an instinct?
So you're saying is bullying an instinct? Or
Yeah, I
is-
mean, and I don't know if bullying is the right word, but that's sort of, playing with, if, we compare orcas and porpoises and dogs and bunnies and,
I think I'm more likely to say, rather than bullying, that's an inherent either hunting or play instinct that's getting expressed in a maybe like a dog. So a puppy accidentally kills a mouse or a bunny or whatever. The other dogs don't tell them they're a bully or that was wrong or whatever. They were just following their instincts. They probably wouldn't also tell them, boy, do that every time you see a bunny, right? It's
right,
just,
right. Yeah. So yeah,
I
it's
don't know.
just an interesting, like,
Kim, I can't remember the question that you had just asked, but it made me, whatever it was, it made me think of something. So, um, like I've read this chapter a bunch of times, and I reread it again this afternoon, and like I always get something different from it. When it's kind of like reading any of the chapters, I always get something different from it, and I can't remember where I was reading this or watching, and I'm curious, Kim, whether you've experienced this. I was maybe I was listening to a podcast, but it was somebody talking about, allowing horses who have been very controlled, which is virtually all horses, right? Taking horses who have been very, very controlled and are having behavior issues where the rider just can't get past these behavior issues, and this particular trainer works in more, in really in a liberty setting, and allows, his thing is about allowing horses to experience their emotions and to learn to make choices. And he's talking about how, like, when you start doing this and when you start allowing a horse to do that, oftentimes their behavior gets quote unquote worse. They may get explosive and they may get what seems like unpredictable, because all of a sudden they've gone from like being under somebody's thumb completely to like, I can, oh my God, I get to express myself. And, like I experienced that very much growing up, where it's like my family was so narcissistic that I liken it to living in a cult, like I was so constantly controlled and gaslit, that it's like I wasn't allowed to have boundaries. I had no trust in myself. I didn't understand how I felt about anything. Like I had nothing. I had no trust in myself. And like, I left home at 17 and went to college. I'm kind of astonished I was allowed to do that, honestly, but I did. And like I just kind of went nuts because all of a sudden I just went from like being in control of absolutely nothing to being able to make, well, not any decision I wanted, but a lot of decisions I wanted. And I still struggle a great deal with trusting myself and understanding what I want and understanding what's good for me. And like, even if I understand what's good for me, a lot of times I can't implement what's good for me. And like, you know, Kathleen, you were talking about your experience working with kids who have acquired brain injuries. And I have a TBI that happened about a year ago. And I've talked about it a lot here. And, you know, like one of the things that's happened is that it's become very, I have felt like I can't trust myself because I'm so hot. You know, it's like I go from like normal to just like, and it's gotten much better, but like, especially in the beginning, I would go from like just baseline to like blinding rage like that, you know, and would express it. And I never used to do that because I was so like, I wasn't allowed to do that, you know, and I was a very functional person and I functioned well in society and all of that. And then all of a sudden I was just like, why, you know, and like, you know, I realized over the weekend, like I had kind of, I was in a 6.5 hour rehearsal. I swear this has a point. I was in a 6.5 hour rehearsal. I have not done that any rehearsal in a very long time. And I had a very challenging interpersonal thing that came up in this rehearsal. And like, I was just, it's like, I had this second where I was like, I'm about to have a very inappropriate reaction to this in front of all of these professional musicians. And I'm really trying to get back into playing music. And like, I was able to bring it back down, you know, because I was like, I don't want to do this. This is important to me. It's valuable to me. And I choose not to have this reaction. And I felt really good about it. And, you know, like, as we've been talking, I've been realizing like, I have felt like I can't trust myself, you know, because of these, what I consider inappropriate reactions. But really my reactions before to being treated like garbage were the inappropriate ones. I let people treat me like shit constantly, either overtly or covertly by, you know, just like gaslighting me or not listening to me or using me as their like free therapist or whatever. Like I didn't react appropriately to those situations because I just didn't trust myself to say like, that's not okay. So like for whatever reasons, like by, you know, chemical reasons, like after this injury, I was able to, and I didn't necessarily express it in the best way all the time, but like, but I have gotten to a point where I'm just like, I'm not tolerating this. Like, fuck off. I don't want to be your friend. Like, I don't want you on my Facebook page. I'm not doing this with you. And
Good.
like, I don't
Like,
know.
more,
It is,
more true to yourself, maybe, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yes. I mean, I guess in a way, it's kind of like, you know, when a horse goes from being in these like just hyper controlled situations where people are just like, we're gonna do this, and I'm gonna make you, you know, knock my glasses off. I'm gonna try harder and harder to make you do this. And, you know, and then all of a sudden they're just like, oh, wait, I get to decide what I do.
Well, and what's interesting, Kate, is that those horses that go a little wild, then if it's just the horse and the humans, it might get really out of control. But what will
Yeah.
happen if they're in a herd when they do that is the
Yeah.
other horses are going to put some like boundaries
Yeah.
back up. Is like, okay, you keep that energy over there. Like you can do
Yeah.
it, but not right here.
Yeah.
Right. They're not trying to control them, but there are some parameters where then eventually the horse is like, oh, I kind of like to be part of the community. So then they self-regulate and come back.
Yes.
So yeah, whereas then the horse is like out of control and nothing's keeping it, you know,
There's
no
a
reason,
container.
no motivation to kind of act
Yeah.
differently. Like you had that motivation that said, no, wait, I don't want to have that reaction, because the
Yeah.
horses do eventually find that place, I think, in the herd,
Yeah.
start making more responsible choices because they want to be part of the community. right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just not instant gratification. Like it's not for the person working with the horse. It's not like, oh, well, they fixed it. Now he's going to act perfect, you know?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'm
sorry,
gonna
that
have
was
to
a
go.
lengthy, yeah.
You gotta go, Mary. Thank you. We'll be wrapping
Okay.
up in a minute, but yeah.
Good to see y'all.
You
You
too.
too.
Mary,
One other little story that I wanted to land it on maybe is something I've seen in horses, including my horse Puck. I have seen so a lot of times what happens with people is we get mistreated or some kind of traumatic experience happens, and then we don't know how to trust people at all, right? There becomes sometimes this like, I can't trust anyone because of that situation. And what I've seen in some, and I was curious about this because it's particularly Puck, who has as much reason as any of my horses to not really trust people or want touch, right? So both Rayleigh and Tempo have their own different reactions that show very clearly that they do have a bit of trouble trusting people, right? Whereas Puck doesn't. And the thing that's different about Puck, only because I know it about Puck, Puck lived with the same, so my ex-husband was her owner. So she and I dealt with the same dynamic there, right? And that dynamic was within the same individual, never quite sure who's going to show up today, right? So it's not like I trust you and I don't trust, sometimes other horses, it seems like once I feel like you're okay, you're okay. What I see in Puck is this really uncanny ability where she just trusts herself to read the other person's energy. She says, I don't care who you are, but I see how you're showing up and that's what I trust, right? She seems even better at that than the others who have had trauma and still seem to struggle with this decision of, do I trust or not? Puck can really quickly be like, you're cool, right? So I don't know, is that something she learned by having to learn to read humans that way? Because it's a trusted human, but maybe it shows up. I don't know. I was curious about that, but I do watch her trust herself to read someone's energy and that she's really good at that. Right? Any
I would
thoughts on
think
that?
it's back to the nature nurture question.
Mm.
I mean, horses have personalities. I don't know horses as well as I do children, maybe in this regard, but I mean, could it be part of Puck's personality that also responded in that way to having that influence when she was young?
Could well be, right? Yeah. I often chalked it up to that for a long time, is just she's just got a more resilient personality, if resilience is even the right word. It just didn't affect her as traumatically as others. But I have seen her have strong reactions to certain energies. So she doesn't just automatically trust.
I'm curious, Kim, having grown up in a volatile, environment myself, like I think, for me that turned me into being hyper vigilant, and reading people's energies because I had to be able to do that, right? And I think people who grow up in like alcoholic homes and just, a lot of traumatic kind of environments learn to read people very quickly because they're trying to avoid the shit show as much as they can and violence. And so like that has been to my disadvantage sometimes. And like in my work, I worked in sales, like that was a tremendous advantage for me. And I was like, finally, I have found a way to make this work for me. But I'm curious, like, I mean, have you experienced Puck as being hyper vigilant with people, or do you feel like she's just more kind of like self-possessed and just like, I know in my core, like I can make the right choice about a situation?
She seems to trust herself. I mean, there are times when she doesn't, she just stays off.
Mhm.
Not to say that that's bad energy or not, but it's
Yeah.
very clear with her when she decides, like if she'll see someone and if she wants to, she just comes, like there is just a very like no hesitation in her when she's doing it and when she's not. Whereas the others seem a lot more kind of like, I'm feeling this out, I'm feeling this out, I'm feeling this out, right?
Yeah.
So it's just something I've noticed. Maybe it is just innately her.
Yeah.
But it's
I
interesting.
experienced Marcus that way too. I mean, was he that way in general? Like
Marcus
just very like,
Marcus came up to anybody pretty much.
yeah.
He just, yeah.
Yeah.
I think My horse Gus is like that. And I like to say, oh, it's just because, he's a Zen master. But, you know, there was a period of time, I've had him since he was 4, he's 26. So, there was a period of time when, you know, I was maybe not, I don't ever say, like I was not this abusive horse person, but I mean, Kim, like, you've been in that, mindset of, you know, getting things done or whatever. And so, you know, did he learn from that? And then of course there were times where I was coming from, full-time 911 dispatching job or whatever, and, was I different, because I didn't at that time wasn't aware of, what my attitude might be going into it. So, you know, did he maybe learn that from being around me? Maybe, I feel like he's also, he's, have you ever, that book, Is Your Horse a Rock Star? By Dessa Hockley. So it's really interesting. She kind of goes through, like, it's kind of like the personality characteristics. She kind of like they do in people, like the Myers-Briggs. It's sort of akin to that, but it's, with the horse. And she gives these really cute like names to, like the rock star, the gangster, and it's kind of cute, but and so one of the qualities is friendly or aloof. And he's always been a bit aloof, he's always the one that's going to take in the situation and then decide, and he's always been like that. So, but it's interesting because, like, even my thoroughbred mare, who's had, I would say way more abuse trauma in her life than he ever had, she tends to be a little bit more curious. She'll be like, oh, hey, and then, then I'm gonna get out of here, whereas he's like
Taking that. Yeah. And I get,
oh,
part of it surely is they have different personalities and there's the nature nurture. Yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting.
Yeah,
But I
and
think in their own ways, they all trust themselves, right?
yeah,
Whatever their approach is, they're trusting, they're not doing it to please us or because it's what they think they're supposed to do.
right,
Assuming we don't have treats that are, they're motivating,
right,
being motivated
right.
by something else, but yeah.
And like Gus tends to be very adaptable, as long as you're not trying to force him into something, like, and he's kind of like, oh, I can go with the flow as long as the intention is good, whereas my mare, if it's something that she's not got a good vibe about or something that's, past trauma, I mean, for sometimes it's like a smell for her or something, she's like not going there. It's not happening, and she will fight to the death about that. It's just not, whereas he's a little bit more like, well, now if you really tried to like manhandle him, he's like, I'm not there with you. But so it's yeah, it's interesting. Like, is that something that, he learned to be adaptable being around me? Or is that just his natural way? I don't know.
It's the endless question
But he does trust himself very much. And I jumped him early in his life, and he was awesome. He was the safest horse in the world because he would not get himself in trouble.
let him just take care of him himself.
Exactly. I mean, I didn't really have to do anything, just point and go. And he's like, yep, I'm taking care of myself. So yeah.
Well, it could be fun for all of us, I guess, in the days and weeks ahead, just to make note of when we're trusting ourselves,
Hmm.
when we're pushing through. I don't know, just kind of sit with those feelings, and Anna, with your kids, I don't know if you can notice when
Right.
they're trusting themselves, right?
Yeah.
Do they have this desire to want to do that as kids.
Mhm.
I don't know.
Well, I don't know if you saw the video that I posted of my one on Facebook. Daredevil, our driveway is kind of
I did
steep,
see that. Yeah.
right, on his tricycle. But he will not ride amusement park rides.
He's not in control of those.
Right. And that's what everybody said. Everybody's like, he's not in control of that.
He trusts himself to keep himself safe, whether he will or not.
Right.
But
Right.
doesn't trust something that he
Yeah.
isn't in control.
Interesting. Yeah.
Makes a lot
Can I tell a little story? It's not my story, and I swear it's quick, not like my stories. So you were talking about jumping, jumping your horse, and like he wouldn't get himself into trouble. All right, so like from a rider's perspective, which I am not, I'm sure this is not funny, but like I was watching a video on Facebook, and I'll try to find it, but it was of somebody in a jumping competition, and like and I don't know shit about riding technique, but from what I gather, she kept like pulling the horse back when he was supposed to be jumping. So she kept fucking him up, basically. She was like doing stuff and not letting him work, do his work. And so eventually he dumped her. He just dumped her off, and like she wasn't hurt. She sort of like slid off and like ran off, but then he just kept going around and around this circuit, and he was having it just jumping,
Jumping it by himself.
Huh?
He was jumping it by himself.
Yeah, and doing perfect, and just obviously having a blast, and all these people are trying to catch him, and he's just like, I'm going, man, I'm going.
Right. I know what I'm
And it was just like the best. It's like,
yes.
man.
I saw one like that of a barrel racer. Like he would not let this chick get on him. And she finally she was exasperated. She's like, and he took off, ran the barrel pattern, and came back. Like
He's like, see what I can do without you.
Right. Exactly. They don't need us. They're right. They trust themselves. They don't need us.
Yeah.
We're messing it up. Yeah.
Yep. Exactly.
Funny. Good conversation.
You proved the point. At the end, all the stories go back to the same thing.
Trust themselves, right?
Right.
Trust themselves. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where, let's turn that on its head for us, is we always think about trust being someone has to earn our trust and all of that kind of stuff. When we should really be focusing on trusting ourselves and letting them trust themselves. I think once that's in place, it's pretty easy to navigate the rest if we're honest about those two things, like even with the horses or anything, right? It's like we're both going to come from a place of just being authentic.
Easier with the horses because they don't have the language. As you said in your book, the language gets in the way.
Language gets in the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can we read the body language? Can we focus on other people's body language? Which sometimes is not as honest either, but it's more honest usually.
Well, in their actions. I mean, it's like a lot of times like it's just like what they do is the ultimate, even more than certainly more than what they say, and oftentimes more than how their body expresses, because a lot of people's bodies are shut down, but it's like what you do tells who you are.
And can we, I guess we'll end with this. When someone does something that's maybe not what we wanted, like when my boyfriend wasn't returning my text or like texting me out of the blue, instead of being judgmental about that, can we just honor that? Okay, they're being true to themselves right now, right? When that authenticness comes up of I want to reach out, he'll reach out, right? And not read all this other stuff into it of what it means when he's not. Or so, watching ourselves also, do we allow other people to be true to themselves without making them feel wrong about it?
Yep.
Yeah, funny about that, because I had a little bit of the same thing with my husband now, when we got together, but same thing, like it was worked out early on. But so moving forward, he's been a fireman now, he's a deputy chief, so he works during the day, but he was working 24-hour shifts for a long time. And sometimes we wouldn't talk for 24 hours, and people would just be like, what? Like, and he would tell me stories about, spouses that, were texting and calling and, constantly during, this 24-hour period. And, and I was just like, he's at work, he's doing his thing. I don't, like, I'm doing my thing. I'm happy that he's not here. I'm doing, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Enjoying your time to do your own thing.
Right.
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 Yeah.
But it's funny how many people don't trust that, and they don't. And as much as I think they maybe don't, I think their lack of trust in themselves is more than their lack of trust in the other person.
Yeah.
Like they need that constant reinforcement, then yeah.
Yeah. So next month is, I have to look back at what is lesson 5. I have to. Human intelligence is neither superior nor inferior.
Mm.
They all tie in together, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I gotta finish. There's a book called "Are We Smart Enough to?" Oh shit, what's it called? Are we smart enough to understand animal intelligence? It's something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But only if we get in touch with our inner.
Right. So
Yeah.
we're gonna have to do some research on this, like large animal versus small animal. Right.
But-
I'm intrigued by this now.
Do some research, but be careful with the research, because what I find, you've got to find the research that's actually like ethology, or like the study of truly
Yes.
wild, because there's lots of studies that are like
Based on
not
domesticated. Yeah.
Yes.
natural situations, right? So
Yeah.
it would be great to study that though and understand it a little more.
Yeah.
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 Interesting. It'll be interesting to see if there is any research out there on it.
We're usually
Well,
only,
and then,
only interested in animal behavior when we think it's going to confirm some theory we have.
Exactly. Right.
exactly. I mean, I was gonna say, like, and then we misinterpret. So I mean, it's like that whole freaking Caesar Milan crap about like, being the alpha and all that. Like that was based on research of actual wild wolves, but there was a complete misunderstanding of how hierarchy works in wolf packs. Like wolf packs are based around the parents, and they're like the alphas, but it's not like they're constantly reinforcing like I'm the guy. It's like they are the heads of the group because they're the parents.
Yeah.
So it's like people just took this actual information about wild animals and then just twisted it into what they thought it meant.
There's a lot of that out there. So it's like
Yes.
learning how to be sensitive to those things when you're looking at research. Yeah, the motivation behind it. So.
Yeah.
Trust your gut as you're doing as you're looking at the research.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everyone. This was a great discussion. We're gone a little bit long, so we'll wrap it up. But it was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll see y'all hopefully next time.
Yeah.
Bye,
Good
guys.
night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.